Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sonic Talk, episode 330. I did get this right. 34. That's right. Recording today, live Wednesday, the 23rd of May, 2018. Having a bit of a heat wave here in the UK, even though it was hot and blustery and thunderstormy. I think there's a lot of thunderstorms for all you guys in Europe at the moment. I'm seeing it moving across. I'm supposed to be going on holiday next week, and early part of this week it wasn't looking too great where I'm going, and so I'm hoping it'll all have blown over and I'll have a very pleasant time and the weather will take a turn for the worse. It's nothing like when you go on holiday and you know that back home you're missing some bad weather. It's not fun when it's the other way around, but it's fun. Anyway, this isn't a holiday broadcast. It's a podcast to do with music technology and such like. We cover synthesizers, software, music production, controllers, all that kind of thing. So please do sit back and enjoy the show. We have a sponsor this week in terms of competition prize. You can win a copy of iZotope's Neutron 2. Incidentally, Neutron just dropped the news of Vocal Synth 2, which just came out today. That looks kind of interesting. Perhaps we'll be able to snaffle that as a prize in the future weeks. We'll see how that goes. I want to say hello and welcome to our chat room, people. This is the YouTube chat room where you can find us, youtube.com/Sonicstate/live. And on the IRC, if you just go to sonicstates.com/live, you can access the IRC old school chat room. So I'm trying to keep an eye on both of them at the same time, but if you're trying to get my attention, it might be slightly diverted between running the show, talking, and all the other things that tend to happen here, but we'll try and keep an eye on things. Anyway, lovely to have you. Let's say hello first of all to Mr. Yoad Nevo, who is there in his lovely facility in London. He's got the beauty shot back up. Yoad, of course, producer, engineer. Do you songwrite as well, or are you more on the other side?
I'm writing a lot, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Not top lines as such, but mainly kind of beats and chords and stuff.
Right, okay,
and in collaborating a lot with other top liners.
Excellent, that sounds great. And of course, Yoad is involved heavily in producing some plugins for Waves. I know he's been working on something, but he can't tell us what it is. But we'll probably see it in the light of day sometime soon. And that's all we can say, right?
Yeah, I've been working on this specific thing that you're asking about for the past 2.5 years or something like that. So hopefully it will see the light of day soon. Otherwise, it'll be very annoying.
Yeah, I guess that's interesting, that creative cycle, because I mean, an album typically would not usually take more than about a year these days. I mean, certainly that's kind of seen as excessive, just purely because of the cost of doing it. So to see some other projects that last longer is kind of it seems a bit unusual in a way. But I mean, you've got to get it right?
Yeah, I mean, there have been several projects that took us like 3 years. The H Reverb is one that from when we started it until it was released, it was about 3 years or something, and it proved itself because it's very popular. And some other projects that took a while, but usually it takes, I don't know, it never takes less than a year from start to finish on a product, because there's the research period and then the R&D and then product definition and all that, and software and graphics and testing and all that. So it takes a long time, but this particular one that I'm working on right now is it's quite long.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll have to stay tuned for that. And also we have Mr. Charles Chicky Reeves, who is back from his travels where he's been doing front of house for OMD. Got a little bit of downtime, although I'm sure it's not downtime because now you're in your studio where he writes songs, produces, remixes, mastering, all that kind of stuff. You've been doing a lot of that, Charles?
I have been. Yeah, I've been doing working on a soundtrack right now. Although we do have a bunch of shows scheduled. But I'm doing a lot of electronic-based soundtrack work right now, and doing a bit of sound design for a video game thing, and then, writing my own stuff. And so I'm keeping myself nicely busy. This is what I do in my off time. Is I actually work on my off time. So yeah.
Or it could be, but I suppose it depends which way around you look at it. I mean, traveling, there's a lot of downtime in traveling as well. I mean, particularly when you're touring. I mean, that whole kind of cycle of getting up, going to the next show. I mean, were you doing shows back to back, or were you kind of having a bit more, was there more travel time in between them on most of what you've just done?
So we were gone October, November, December, February, March, April, and on all those we would do usually 3 shows, have a day off, do 3 more shows, or two shows and have a day off, and that was kind of our week. We rarely did more than 3 shows in a row, though. When I was touring with Howard Jones, we'd do like 7 shows in a row, and then have sort of a day off, which was just us traveling somewhere. And the only reason we didn't fit a show in there was because it took too long to get between the 2 venues. But yeah, with OMD, it's a much more relaxed. So the 3 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off is our week. It's a lot easier that way. I like that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that because, I mean, I've only ever done tours when I've probably done, I don't know, 3 or 4 in a row. And the thought of, I mean, there must come a point at which, you know, you can look at it 2 ways, can't you? You can either be, you get really honed, or you just get really worn out. I mean, because it's, you know, the energy peaks and troughs are a thing that you have to deal with. I wonder, you know, do you think there's an aspect of doing that, doing a longer run is better? Or maybe if you're a resident somewhere and you don't have to travel, you just show up at the theatre, which maybe you got a week's shows at.
Yeah, that's a lot easier to do. It's the showing up to a new venue each day, and you know, when you sort of, you know, your bus pulls in early in the morning into a venue, and you wake up and you're inside the venue already, and you know, you spend the whole day setting up the show. You do the show. You spend the rest of the evening breaking down the show. You get on the bus, and then the next day you're at another venue. Like that, you would think you get into a rhythm of things, but that actually really is wearing. It's really wearing. 3 days is great because on the second day, when you're kind of tired from having done another show, you know, you're thinking, well, there's one more show. It's then I get a day off, so that's fine. 4 is a little bit tough because you're like, oh crap, there are 2 more shows. But 7, that's just like, it's just pull your hair out kind of thing. it's right. It was really hard to do it like that. But you know, luckily I have to say though, with OMD, it's pretty easy. Comparatively speaking, partly because a lot of it is we've got you know, we've got the whole thing planned. It's all DI based stuff except for the vocal mics and the sax mic and a couple of drum things, but generally speaking, everything is on DI, and it's just very quick for us to set up. We really have a very fast setup considering how complex it is. I'm really happy about how we worked it out.
I suppose that's the thing with modern technology. You can get so much more. I guess it must be much tougher if you're like a rock and roll act, where it's, you know, it's about the largesse of the back line and the kind of the theatre of it, and there's a more energy and more things have to go right, and there's perhaps more things that can go wrong when you've got a lot of mic'd up stuff. But yeah, okay. Well, let's if we're talking about largesse and excess, let's start with this. This is our friend Tom Carpenter at Analog Solutions, who bizarrely also really collects digital equipment. And this is a cover that he did, which is, he called it an Old Grey Whistle Test Pet Shop Boys reunion. So this is actually filmed in kind of old school style. He's got a bank of CRTs there. There we go. I'll get them. Couple of Fairlights synced up. Emulator 2. DX1 as well, which is always nice to see. SRC AT, you might remember that. What else did he have? So that's Tom there on the left, and friend helping out. So they do a cover basically of it's from 1986. So the album was Please, and it's called Opportunities. And Tom says that he did it because he remembers as a kid seeing that, and it was so influential. And it's been this sort of really long project to bring all of these things together. If you follow Analog Solutions or Tom on Facebook, you've been seeing these photos. You go, oh, there's a Fairlight. And you go, that's nice. And now it seems we know why. I think the one I'm most jealous of is the DX1. But I suppose the thing that is, you know, that's a pretty completist thing. I mean, you work with some of these guys who were kind of around in the day and were perhaps using some of that stuff. And I mean, at least he's not touring it, but hell of a project.
Oh my God. Yeah. I didn't realize Tom was doing that. Although I had been seeing what he's been posting on Facebook, but wow, that was impressive. You know, it's kind of weird though. It's like, I'm glad he did it, but I would never do that. Just like, you know, and even the acts that I work with, they're kind of like, oh yeah, we used to use the Jupiter 8 for this, and we, you know, and we used to have a Fairlight for this, and now they're like, no. If we had to redo that song, we do it with the Fairlight app on the iPad, and you know, the like some simulation that you were like, we would not go for the original stuff because it's just too difficult to put together. And and even reading what Tom did, it sounds like it was very tricky to put it together. He was doing some of the trickiness was in the video playback because I think he was using two DVDs for playback and record the whole thing on a Zoom R8 or something.
R8, yeah, 3 of them I think they had. Yeah, I think that sounds like the hardest stuff rather than, I mean, because what's bizarre about it is he's actually just using MIDI, to sync these up, which is, still what you might use these days. So that's kind
although he was replaying parts because there was a lot of parts that he didn't have MIDI going for it. So
that's true.
So he was replaying quite a few things. I think it's very admirable.
But a bit obsessive.
It's a weird. I mean, I would say this to his face. I'd be like, "Wow, that is pretty obsessive, man." But it was great. It was great. I wouldn't do it, but it's great.
Yeah, no, it's jolly good fun. I don't know. I mean, I guess most of the stuff that you're dealing with that comes through, you might have something that's been tracked on one of these old beauties, but nobody's going to bring one into the studio to kind of to record it.
Not really. I mean, I feel lucky that I had the opportunity to actually produce and mix and make music this way. I mean, I'm not gonna say how long it was because it will just tell how old I am. But I used to have the Atari and a good 8 or 10 pieces of like MIDI stuff, all connected together and recorded to 2-inch tape and all that. So I, it's kind of nostalgic, but I don't. In a way, I kind of miss it because it was a more hands-on approach stuff and all that. And these days, you just move the mouse and kind of the most labor-intensive thing you have to do these days is to decide which plugin you want to use, and it's a little bit boring. I mean, I still have the gear, and actually much more than I had back in the day. But I'm not gonna run this kind of setup again. It's like it's too much.
It's interesting though. I don't know if you remember the SRC AT, which is the SRC was a sync box, so it was a MIDI, it's a SIMP to MIDI timecode box. And it was the thing that I first bought because it would allow you, particularly when you had a crummy 4-track where the timecode would drop out, it had a jam sync function which would allow you to, and you could put tempo maps into it, but it was a really horrible. And restripe. That's right.
To restripe the sound. There was that. There was the SMP24. It was a Steinberg hardware sync box, which
multi-ports,
was quite amazing. Yeah, but also what you could do is you could feed it with audio, and it would create the tempo map, the MIDI tempo map, based on the audio you feed it to.
Oh, like a click.
Like a click, yeah. So what you would say that it's a quarter note time bass, and then all the drum parts back in the 80s were like kick snare anyway. So you would feed it, you would bust the kick and the snare and feed it to that thing, and it would create a tempo map which you could transfer via SysX to the Atari into Cubase, and then you would basically sing. So in a way, it's like what Logic has just done recently, where you can tempo map, your session to an audio, but that was vice versa. You could tempo map the MIDI to the existing audio from the 2-inch tape, and that was quite amazing and quite advanced for the time. I don't know why they stopped making it because it was a really good box.
Yeah, I remember. I think we had a few of those. There was a funny looking thing that was sort of triangular that you'd stick on the side of the Atari, which had a bunch of ports. Mid-X or something was it called?
There was the Mid-X, and then there was the Uniter. The Uniter was amazing because it gave you that was for C-Lab, for the predecessor of Logic.
Yeah.
Because it gave you 7 ports, plus another 3 from the printer port on the back, so you had like 12 or 13 MIDI ports. It was quite amazing.
Yeah, and that was the back of the day when, you know, you get kind of congestion when you're running large MIDI rigs like we all were, because we could get so many more live tracks than we could print to our, you know, if you had a 2-inch or a Mitsubishi or something, then great. But most of us only had 4 or 8 tracks, so you could run any number of things. It's interesting, isn't it? It's sort of, people are kind of going, what's the point of this? But isn't it similar in a way to, you know, looking for that classic guitar rig, which has got, you know, your authentic telly, you know, from 1950s, and an authentic Fender Champ or something like that. It's kind of a similar, isn't it? I mean, there's not that much of a difference. I mean, obviously a bit more excessive.
But it sounds different as well, because the fluctuation of MIDI and all that, it all contributes to the fatness and analog and kind of early digital synths, which were kind of awful but sounded great at the same time, and really noisy. And I don't know, maybe I'm just looking back with kind of a nostalgic view on the whole thing, because I don't think I was any happier as a person at the time. It's just looking back on it.
That's a great line. All right, Charles, any of those things that featured there that you would like to have? I must admit, I've wanted a DX1. And it's not. There's no reason for it other than it's just such an iconic synthesizer. It really is. I mean, even a 5 would do, but a 1 is just. I think I've got a couple of pictures of it here. They're but they're a bit hard to say. And you get there's a guy who shows up. I think it's the Ploytech guys at Superbooth. They sometimes show it with a DX1. Use it a master keyboard for those funny little MIDI-driven synthesizers that come in a MIDI cable, you know. And it's just a brilliant juxtaposition. God knows what they like to program.
Oh, I can imagine.
Like,
I mean,
killing a mosquito with a Phonebook.
Yeah,
that's a good one. I'm gonna have that. I'm gonna have to put that in as a title substitute. Killing a mosquito with a Phonebook.
Excellent.
Okay, that's in there for a title. Yeah, but admirable, I suppose, is fair to say, isn't it? But but a bit weird.
And I wouldn't mind having like one of the old Fairlights, just so at least I could compare it to the app, because the app is actually pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to have something like that sitting in here. I mean, I've got a few keyboards and stuff. So, well, you can't see them now because of the way I have the computer angled, but I've got a few keyboards around here that just look beautiful, but honestly, I don't use them that much, but they do look great in here. So, and people walk and go, wow, that's amazing. Anyway, so let's work on these keyboards over here.
Yeah. That's fun. No, it's funny, isn't it? I remember, because I know you're a fan of the Matrix Brew, and it's a similar thing. It's like a muscle car of a synth, but it's a modern muscle car, in the same way that the Schmidt is. And I suppose to a degree, maybe some of the OB6 and what have you. I mean, I don't know what else there is in terms of sort of muscle car synths. I don't know. Have you got any ones that you got the Rev 2, which is quite impressive, but it's not quite.
The Rev 2 is cool. It's cool. I mean, as far as modern synths go, I think that kind of it is that you can argue that that a big modular rig is one of those. I don't know. I still like my old 101 and Minimoog and all that, and Jupiter, and there's something about those sounds and those synths. Actually, I do have a K5, a Kawai K5M, which is an additive synth, and this is an amazing machine. I mean, the noise it generates is pretty much equivalent to the sound it makes. So the noise is really, really loud, but what you can get out of it, it's quite mind-blowing, and it taught me a lot. I learned so much about synthesis just using this particular synth, and I really love it. It sounds like that was Kawai's kind of answer to the D50, the release of the D50,
well, it had partials, didn't it, as well, sort of sample partials, if I remember correctly.
No, not at all. It's just additive. It has 64 or 128, which is quite remarkable for the time. Oscillators, like sine wave oscillators, and but the great thing about it is that you can assign them to groups. So you have 4 groups of envelopes. So you have 4 envelopes, and then you can assign all the odd harmonics to one, and all that, and you can really sculpt the sound. It's a beautiful. I think it's the best still to this day. I think it's the best kind of hardware
Wow.
interface that I know, because it has
Is
a
that it
proper
there?
screen.
Is that it
Yeah, yeah,
there?
yeah. That's the one. That's the one.
It looks
That's the
very
one.
data entry driven, but yeah, I had a
No,
K.
it's
I had a
quite
K1.
good.
I had a K1, which I remember the K1. One of the reasons I really like it had a really lovely keyboard feel to it. It was a really nice feel, and that was that. I'm sure that had sample partials. That one, maybe that was a bit different.
That it's different. Yeah, the K1 did. The K1 had analog filters, and it's like almost like a Proteus or something like that. But talking about keyboards and the DX1, the DX7 is still one of the best keyboards, I think. I'm not a pianist. So I'm fine with like kind of semi-weighted or whatever it's called keys or spring driven, but the DX7 has a really beautiful keyboard. I still love it.
Interesting.
Mm.
Here you go, Charles. You can interject with your favourite synth keyboard action of all time.
Oh, you know what? It's easy. The ESQ, the early in Sonic. I liked it because it was really clicky. You know,
Okay.
and also I like my OP1. It has no velocity whatsoever, but it's really clicky. In other words, the common thread here is I like clicky keys.
Charles Clicky Keys. There we go. There's another
That's
possible
right.
title there. I'm just going to write that one down. Charles Clicky Keys. Right.
I vote for that one.
Anyway, if you want to check it out, there isn't really a place where it lives, but we wrote a news story about it, which you can find on the site if you're searching for it. They've also got, I think it's just on YouTube, but the links just point you back to his site, which doesn't have any record to it. So I'm trying to find a bit more of a description in it. Anyway, what about this then? This is the news that Steinberg are now going to... basically VST2 coming to an end, which was announced quite some time back. 2013, they actually stopped the SDK being supported, but there was a kind of a code base within the VST3 SDK which allowed you to sort of wrap VST2 code into the VST3, and it seems like okay, yeah, whatever, everybody's over to that, but that's not actually true. There's a load of plugins that are still VST2 and use that format, and it's a really interesting move because essentially it's going to shut down quite a lot of people who are still just coding VST2, because there are some distinctions and differences. I think VST3 removed sort of full sysx and full CC capability, as far as I understand. I'm paraphrasing here because I am not an expert. I'll start with you, Yad, because I mean I know you develop instruments. I mean, do you think this is a big deal, or is it kind of a whatever?
I think it's inevitable, and I think obviously a lot of companies, a lot of plugin makers will have to catch up and move to VST3. But I think that the trend is to make, and this is what VST3 allows. After so many years of not having sidechain in Cubase and all those things, all those limitations, what VST3 allows is kind of communication between different channels for third-party software makers like Waves. This is something that we started with the NLS back in the day, and QClone after that, which are two plugins that can communicate between different instances of the same plugin. And I think that this trend, and Neuron is iZotope Neuron is using a similar method of communicating between different instances of plugins over that is not their own, or it's
Okay, so it's like an internal communication buses, right?
Exactly, because if you are Steinberg or Apple or Avid, then you can do things like Heat in Pro Tools, where you can control different plugins together, because you own the mixer, so you can build or design the internal architecture of the mixer. But when you're a third-party company like Waves, you have to find ways of communicating and sending control data and audio data between different plugins without having without involving the DAW's mixer. So and we're going to see more and more plugins or more and more companies that will utilize those capabilities. So I think it's quite important for the development of this whole industry. So it's not like VST has a specific sound that we're gonna lose or anything like that. You know what I mean? So it's just VST3 is mainly better in most aspects, and hopefully we will see more protocols that will allow even more integration between mixers, between DAW mixers and plugins in the future. So I welcome this this trend.
Right. Okay. No, interesting. Of course, is it Softtube? They do. I can't remember what that's called now. The Softtube with the controller that must use VST. So there's probably quite a lot of VST3.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Focus. It's like Apogee. They have some sort of integration with Apple. They always used to have that with their controllers, that with their sound cards that allow you to change the mic level from within Logic and things like that. So sometimes you have collaborations between hardware or software makers and DAW makers, but in the majority of cases, you have to, as a plugin manufacturer, you have to just find ways of if you want to do kind of elaborate stuff and communicate between different plugins, then you have to find ways of doing it via side chains and other ways of sending control data. Yeah.
Interesting. Charles, I mean, I'm presuming you're working to film composition. I know you have a lot of instruments, but I mean, as we all do, we have to work in the box just for kind of the sake of brevity and recallability and speed in some cases. I mean, it's not to say that these plugins are going to go away, but there's going to come a point where you have to choose, right, if I upgrade my OS or my DAW, I'm not going to be able to use them anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just seems to me it was announced so long ago that it was going away that I'm kind of surprised a lot of people haven't switched over anyway. But that said, there's not a whole lot I can add to this, only because obviously Yoav knows a lot more about it than I do. And the other thing is I pretty much use AAX and AU because I use Ableton Live, which will run VST and AU plugins. And the AU filing system is just a lot easier for me. So I'd really almost never even delve into VST-based thing. At least certainly not anything that's VST only. I don't have any plugins that are VST only. They're all AX and or AU. So
and they might happen to be VST, but you're not using that version of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In fact, I don't think I've even scanned my latest because I just upgraded my computer system to this new iMac Pro thing, and I don't think I've even scanned for VST plugins at all. So I don't think, because I just
hasn't even scanned, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh no, that's terrible. Yeah, it's just not part of my world. AU and AAX plugins are pretty much all I use.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. There are some interesting comments. Actually, some Muzak in the comments here on this article that we published does mention a couple of things, and one of them is obviously you can still use something like Juice, which will perhaps give you a VST compilation sort of backdoor route to be able to still publish that code. He also mentions that a lot of these outcomes just sort of seems like there's no great, Steinberg aren't necessarily gaining anything by shutting it down, apart from the fact, I suppose, that they don't have to support it. But if they just kept it open and don't support it, I suppose it might limit where they can go with their VST3 development if they're constantly going back and going, it has to have this in it, we're pulling this in. We've talked about this before, haven't we, this sort of notion of DAWs get to a certain age and they're just bringing all this legacy code with and compatibility, and it starts to get really unwieldy, which is I think why we saw maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago there was a whole new tranche of DAWs, Studio One and whatnot that start, and Bitwig, which just start with, here we go, we'll start here, and it just means that they can then move forward without having to bring all that stuff with them. And I suppose that's probably why they've done it more than anything else.
And then inevitably what happens is once these companies make some sort of change, everyone gripes about it. So,
yeah, well, it's a painful process, isn't it? It's difficult.
I was around to remember the whole OS X changeover from OS
Rosetta,
9.
and Rosetta and all of that. Yeah, well, that was painful too.
gosh.
I suppose that's the thing. I mean, it's a bit like GDPR at the moment. We've got to go through all our databases and just strip out any information we might have and ask people if it's okay. It's a terrifying thought when you've got a mailing list of a certain size and you mail them all out going, do you want to stick around? And the percentage of people that do is as low as it is because they're just a lot. I think, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm getting constantly barraged with emails saying, opt in. I'm going, yeah, maybe I won't. This is actually quite a good culling process, but obviously we like to keep people aboard. But anyway, we've still got some friends, but hey, what can I say? This is probably a good time to perhaps bring our little segment in for iZotope. iZotope, of course, Neutron 2, the mixing suite and a set of plugins which help you with sort of post-production, mastering, also channel processing, loads of great features, multi-band dynamic EQ, vintage and classic modes for many of these things. There's gates, compressors, multi-band compressors, soft saturation. I mean, they really have thought of many things. Versatile multi-band compressor, which is incredibly useful. Still something that I struggle with the concept of. As I say, vintage and modern modes. There's also spectral shaping, and I think it's a powerful new gate, which is often overlooked as a thing. Hysteresis, hold, and smooth gating. Really useful just for cleaning up and getting the most out of any audio. Multiband transient shaper. This is also really useful for creating transients across the audio spectrum. Really useful stuff. In fact, I was talking to Rich Hilton, who didn't make it this week. Rich is okay, by the way, because I know he had a lot of storm trouble. He said he couldn't work without the music masking meter system, because it just absolutely shows him where there may be conflicts that he can't necessarily hear. Really useful stuff. Anyway, if you want to get Neutron 2, head over to iZotope.com/Neutron. And as with all the things, 10-day standard demo, which is unlimited as far as I can tell. So yeah, please do try that. And also, we got a competition. Last week we asked for a couple of hashtags for somebody to win Neutron 2, and we have a winner called Rob X Loxley, at Rob X Loxley on Twitter. You have won. It just says, I want to win, and the hashtags we asked for last week. So congratulations. If you want to get in touch, then we'll be able to furnish you with your copy of Neutron 2. And we've also got another competition. You still win Neutron 2. Might be the last one. We may be moving over to Vocal Synth 2, because that was just announced, which looks really interesting as well. We're looking for the hashtag mix balance and the hashtag Neutron 2, and you tweet those to @Sonicstate and @iZotope Inc. It is a Twitter-based competition. We're looking for the hashtag mix balance and the hashtag Neutron 2 to @Sonicstate and @iZotope Inc. And we thank them for providing the prize for this week. Very much appreciated. Let's see what's next. I might go for this one, because this is a bit of fun. This was a great documentary by Estelle Caswell for Vox, and this is the history of the orchestral sample.
Called an orchestra hit. Bruno Mars, he's the king of...
I won't play it all. It's a long and very fun and interesting piece, and it's amazing how that shaped the kind of the soundscape, because it said two things. Back in the day when samplers were very difficult to get hold of, it says we've got one, which is there's an element of one-upmanship and availability, and it also was a very current sound and the pitching of it. And it's Igor Stravinsky from the Firebird Suite, and I think it was originally composed in, what was it? I've got the actual 1909.
Yeah.
Astonishing way back. But I mean, and I don't know whether I'm going to come to you first, Charles. Have you ever used that in your musical past?
Plenty of times. In fact, I'm getting requests to use it more and more now.
Really?
Yeah. It's a big retro sort of thing to add in. And I actually have a recording of the Firebird Suite conducted by Stravinsky. I put that directly off of it.
Wow.
So yeah. It's, I mean, God, that thing, that was when before I was born, obviously. That was a big hit. No, I've never, as a younger person, that was like in every song. The thing I remember it most being was Janet Jackson track.
Oh yeah, Jam and Spoon, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When I Think of You.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
which was
so
a great album.
it was a great album. Was that? Gosh, who did that? Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Was that right?
Was it Jam and Lou or Jam and Spoon? I can't remember who it was. I can't remember. It might be Terry, but it was definitely Jimmy Jam. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So I remember that going, wow, how I didn't understand the whole concept of samplers back then because obviously I was still a zygote. But
Not even.
But I remember not even a zygote. I was just a twinkle in my dad's eye. But that's when I remember kind of go, how do they get this orchestra to do this? I guess they put it on a tape and then they spun the reel of tape in or something, So, and then I started finding out what an emulator was and things like that. So that thus began my downhill slide in life towards
obsession
chasing
into
after sample.
Not long until you become Tom Carpenter, because I suppose there's a link there. Yeah. I know, Yoad. Did you? I mean, again, we're of an age when we would have been using these kind of sounds, and it's an interesting story, this one, isn't it? Because the whole thing was a complete accident. I don't know if you're familiar with the tale of how it came about.
The one thing I didn't get is how did he get away with putting it on the on the Fairlight stock sounds without clearing the actual recording. So,
I don't know that, because back then it was all very that's a very good point. I don't know that. I should just refer. The story is apparently Peter Vogel I think he was just sort of showing somebody what Fairlight could do, and he happened to have this record. He just put it on, put the needle on the record in the classic terms, in true hip hop quote. And that was the thing that he sampled. It was like, oh, there it is. And then it became part of the library. So it was completely random. The only factor that made it likely to happen was it's the first note of the B-side of that recording, but conducted by August Stravinsky, which is just a lovely tale.
Yeah, so it's easy enough to edit the front of that. Yeah, but I mean, it's... Yeah, I mean, Trevor Horn was using a lot of he had this sample hit, this orchestra hit. I'm not sure whether it's that particular one or the other one, because there are two.
Orc one.
There's the one that's the Stravinsky one goes like, it has that gliss in the beginning, and there's the other one who is more like brass. I'm not sure where it's taken from, but it's very popular as well. And so, yeah, I'm a big fan of Trevor Horn, everything he did. So he did the Yes album, whatever the number one for something.
90125.
Exactly.
Owner of a Lonely Heart. There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that I don't think that's the Stravinsky one. I think that's the other one.
I don't know. That's interesting. I've just got to quickly. Let me just quick, because we've got Feld Muso, who if you didn't see our Fairlight special with him, he's actually he thinks it's halfway through side A on the Fireworks Week, so it was even more random. So that's a brilliant. I think he might have actually told me that story. So yeah, brilliant. But there's so many tracks, aren't there? What's Africa Bambaataa, Planet Rock, Duran Duran, the Smiths, even Mantronics. I've even got one myself, and I can't remember whether this is a truncated version of Orc 1 or Orc 2, or whether it's Orc 1. But here we go. This is something I did a long time ago. Here we are.
Is that you?
No, that is Jason, who is the drummer for The Cure. Bizarrely.
Oh, I know Jason. I work a lot with him. He's a great drummer, and he's a really cool guy. Yeah.
So that's it. Actually, Jason, that's really interesting, because Jason, I've known Jason since I was about 14. He's like a childhood friend of mine.
Oh, he's a really, really good guy, and he lives around the corner. And whenever I need like really good drumming, I just call him, and if he's available, if he's not on tour, which he mostly is, then he comes and plays his beautiful drums.
Well, there you go. I did not know that. That's funny. I know that Jason actually has just, through IK, it's the London Sound, or the London, and another drummer have just released a library of sort of grooves and drum kits through IK Multimedia. There you go. Mm-hmm. Wow, it's a small world, isn't it? What a small world. But a great documentary if you haven't had a chance to watch it. And it's got a very rare appearance from Peter Vogel via very pixelated Australian Skype. It's just, I love these kind of things about the history of those sounds. Have you got any other favourite sounds? What's the last vintage sound? I mean, okay, apart from an 808 kick sample. You can't have that.
It's actually another Fairlight sound. I can't remember the name of it. It's that sort of airy vocal sound, but it doesn't sound like voices per se. Gosh, I wish I knew what the name of it was. But it's sort of like a wind
Calliope or
voice
something.
sort of thing.
Right. Okay.
I
Interesting.
can't, it's not a calliope. But it's something. It's gosh, I'll find it. I've got.
I think I know. I think I know. I think I know
Oh,
the one
okay.
you mean. It's quite glassy kind of sound, isn't it?
Glossy, and it's the type of sound you can use on almost any track. It just really
Yeah.
harmonically will fill up a track in a beautiful way. They have it on the a bad imitation of it on the Roland JD800 that I'm actually pointing to right now. But the original Fairlight one is really good.
Exactly. I was about to say that on the D50 they had a similar sound, or the front of a similar sample, which found its way into the JD800 as well. Or
Sarah Chicky says a resident Fairlight expert failed muso. Apparently, it's called SAR, which is SARAR.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
That sounds like yeah.
I love the chat room is a wonderful thing. Yeah,
yeah, they're on fire today.
They are. Yeah. Well, we just so happen to have Failed Muso, who, if you didn't see it, we did a special with him because he was working on restoring Fairlights with Peter Vogel. So he'd get them over here and get them. And we went through a load of. He just sort of had a move through the disk drive on one of them, and it was just all of this stuff. And you just go, oh my goodness! In fact, I'm sure there must be a market for. Remember all those sounds that either wherever they came from, because there was high-end samplers. All the great stuff ended up being conduit back through to the lower end ones like the S900s and the S760 or whatever. All of these kind of lower end ones. And so there's this sort of there's this entire kind of strata, archaeologically almost, of sounds that made it through, were filtered into this sort of the sound set that one would have if you had a sampler, or you might try and get hold of. Yeah, it's an interesting, great, but like I say, great documentary. Sorry, go ahead.
There's something about those S900 and S1000 and even the Casio. I still have the Casio FZ10M, which is a great sampler and has a resynthesis capabilities.
Oh, that's right.
And additive synthesis, a bit like kind of a poor man's synclavier. A really great machine. But sounds, all these libraries that were made and condensed in order to fit on a 2 megabyte floppy disk or 2 floppy disks or whatever, because you had to feed one and then the rest of it, or from that backup and all that. All those there was so much labor put into them, and they were so carefully made, and they still sound great. I have. When I switched to Giga Sampler back in whenever it was from Akai, when it came out, I converted a lot of my Akai samples to the Giga format, and from there, EXS24 can read them, and I still have some of the string samples which are like 1 megabyte and stuff, and some of the slap bass from the Akai and things like that, and they just sound so good. There's something about them that still sounds so good. I mean, it doesn't have those magical converters like the S1000 and all that playing through Logic, but there's something about the actual samples that sounds really good. So if someone is making those libraries, I would be very happy to have one of all the EMU sounds and all that.
Yeah, I mean that would take quite a lot of work just to track it down, I think, wouldn't it? I mean, it's astonishing, really. That what was the thing? There was an Oberheim DPX one or something that had a 5-inch reading disc and a quick disc reader, or it had 2 different flots, so it would read sample sets from Mirages and a few different samples, and it was just a player. I can't remember what it was called.
But by the way, in the Mirage had an orchestra hit, which was, I think that was the other one, because that's a different one. So I think that it came with its own. Mirage was a great machine.
Yeah, I remember, but gosh, this is getting really inside kind of hex. I remember the time when I sent away for my Mirage Massos OS, which came on a separate floppy disk. It was Mirage Advanced Operating System, something or other, and you'd plug that in, and it introduced all these. So you load the samples in, and then you could perform all these other functions on it via this Massos OS, which you'd have to load in to load certain functions off this. It was so clunky and horrible. And I can't even remember what it used to do. It was probably only resampling or advanced.
Yeah, I remember there was something similar on the Yamaha, whatever the sampler was called. I forget, where you would load a sample, and then you would process it in some way. You would wait for like a good minute or something, and then it would just sound better. Sound kind of louder and better. I don't know what it
just normalized, basically. Yeah, probably just normalized.
No, it was more than that. It was like everything more or something.
Yeah.
Sounds like it was worth the wait, I would say. Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad we managed to get that one in. So I know, Gerard, you've got to head off at 5 Dead. So perhaps you might want to choose which of the remaining 2 topics we could do. There, well, 3 in fact. There was the what's your first synth, which was there's the Moogfest one, or I think there's this VST editor for the Korg Volca keys. Would you like to choose one of those?
First thing, synth is one. I have it here in front of me, not the same one, but it's the Gen SX 1000. It's an Italian synth from the, I think, early 80s, very early 80s, and it's just a beautiful synth. My friend had it when I was about 10 or something like that, and I learned. That was the first time I experienced like synthesis of any kind, and it was just mind-blowing. It was but I suppose you're talking about what to recommend to people.
Yeah, let me just quickly. There's an article on Red Bull which says how to buy your first synth. 8 musicians tell you where to start, and there are various people who've kind of got various different approaches. It's kind of interesting. So yeah, I suppose it's got to be relatively affordable and rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously it depends on whether you want to go digital or fully analog. I would say that the micro brute is definitely a candidate because it's in terms of its value, it's quite cheap. You can find them secondhand for, I don't know, 150 or 170.
Yeah, I mean, it's
astonishingly,
like that. Yeah,
and it's quite a good synth. And it has quite a few capabilities, and it has a little patch bay, so it's almost like a semi-modular in a way. I really like the sound of the oscillators. They're quite beefy. The filter is nice. It's not a conventional filter, but it sounds quite good. And all in all, I think it's a damn good little machine.
Okay, that's a good one. I should probably quickly read out the because you're not going to make it through all of those words if I scroll the screen up here. But basically, it came out as K Minor recommended Monarch, which is a really good sort of mini Moog replication for Reactor. I would. It's like an ensemble, isn't it? That is really good.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very
Nobilia.
good.
Iqbal, the Roland Gaia, which is an interesting one. And I remember when that first, because I've reviewed most of these actually. So the Gaia, when it first came out, was a very capable instrument. Even though it's VA, it still was very knobby and lots of synthesis functions and actually quite powerful. You could layer things up. Ian Cook from Churches, I don't know, Pocket Operator.
Churches.
Not sure I would agree with that.
Great band, by the way.
La Leaf, Logic X Retro Synth. Yeah, the synths in Logic are good.
The one thing I didn't get about that is it says the Logic Retro Synth for $20 or 20 quid.
Yeah, it's not, is it?
And it's not because it's free when you get Logic.
So it's not 20 quid, but yeah. And we got a Volca key, Micro Korg, and Arturia Mini V, which is again software. So a bit of a mix of those things. So I mean, obviously, it shows sort of generationally where people are and how they work as well, which is an interesting insight. So as a what would your recommendation be then?
Yeah, CS80. No, no, I think actually the Volca keys is a great place to start. That, a set of headphones, and nothing else, because I would always say, I would say go analog, not because it's not one of those analogs better than digital or anything like that. It's just that with analog, you at least can see the signal flow. You can understand the path of what's happening. And just like you had said, the micro brute or the mini brute, which is what I have. Either one of those would be absolutely fantastic to have. I mean, they're great synths. They're cheap as chips. I mean, maybe not that cheap, but yeah, they're pretty cheap and easy to figure out right off the bat.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Now, my first synth was actually a CS20M. So if you can get one of those, it's great because those are pretty easy to figure out.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing, like straightforward, like SH101, which is, I think, my favorite synth of all times.
Yeah, well, and now you can get that obviously in boutique form, but it's still going to be about 349. And I think mine is probably the mini log. I think because it sounds it can sound really good as a mono, but it's also got even just 4-note poly and all of that parameter modulation that you can do via the sequencer. I think it's a real unsung little classic. I mean, Korg obviously got quite a few in there. The Micro Korg, lots of people. I mean, that's one of the biggest selling synths of all time, the Micro Korg, bizarrely. Certainly for Korg, anyway. But yeah, I think the Mini Log is a cracking little synth, and you can get so much out of it. And because it's got a delay, you've also got the ability to create some space around things, and you can modulate the delay. So I think I might, but it's still. I think it's still. I don't know how much it costs these days. What does the
400
Mini Log
or 450 something like that? I've got one too. I love it. I love that thing.
Yeah, I mean, I use it all over. Yes, so it's still a bit pricey, so it's a bit further up. But I think outside of that, I mean, for 150 quid, Micro Brute, pretty hard to beat, I would say, in terms of bang for the buck. Apart from the fact it's mono. If you want poly, then that's unless you're going software. But then you kind of got to factor in the fact that you need a computer and you need other stuff. Whereas first synth starting out, I think I'd go for that.
Yeah, I think something you plug headphones into and play. That's the way to go.
Yeah.
Just don't even get a computer involved in it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's a good. I'll tell you what I've got here as well. I've got the Microvolt, which is the Pittsburgh modular, which I have to say, it's got this plucked
That's
low
nice.
pass gate, and you could drive it. Hold on, if I do that.
Yeah.
And the wave folding. Yeah, I'm going to do a review on that sometime soon. Hopefully, I don't know if I'm going to get it in before I go on holiday, but it's a nice little synth.
They're quite pricey, aren't they?
Yeah, they're about 500 quid, 600 quid, those desktop ones. It does look pretty cute. It's only a single oscillator, though, which is... I did a Friday Fun Jam thing last Friday with the Pittsburgh Modular SV1, and I had used it for a while because mine was a really early version. It was even pre-production, so the tracking on the oscillators were a bit out, so I could only ever get like a certain amount, and it seemed to go off over time because when I reviewed it, I wasn't getting that sort of issue. But when I went to Superbooth, I took it with me, and they replaced it with the sort of latest revision, and it sounds absolutely brilliant. That thing is just, the oscillators and the filter and the envelope in that are just absolutely beautiful, I have to say. Again, it's a pricier affair, and it's but yeah, lovely sounding thing. Okay then, well, we're sort of getting close. I know that you've got to head off, Yoad, so I don't want to drag you any longer. I just wondered, is there anything we can't really cover anymore? I think did you see any of the Moogfest stuff? That was Moogfest was last week, and I think I've got they did a playlist, they did some live streaming. If I just play a bit of this quickly, this was Author and Punisher, sort of interesting industrial thing with a really fascinating control interface that he built, which is like a big mechanical handle and a load of knobs and stuff. Quite an interesting sound. But, I mean, part of that was Moogfest, isn't it great? But the other thing was the streaming side of it just seems to make so much sense, and particularly if you've got a trade show which has a musical context to it, because I mean NAMM is about music, but there's not much music there that's not kind of fairly traditional, so you don't have much live venue stuff. Do you think it's the future, Yoad? Online streaming of events, so if you can't make it in person, you can kind of get a vibe from it, because it seems like it makes sense.
Possibly, not only events but also studio work. I try to evolve the streaming capabilities for many years now, working remotely, which is something I do a lot. and trying to get the sound quality better and better. But I don't know, with with VR and with VR glasses or whatever, screens and all that, and 3D video, but also immersive sound and all that. Who knows? I mean, it would definitely be more. I mean, people used to go to the cinema, and now a lot of people watch Netflix and what have you. So it definitely penetrated that market, and the same thing will happen to music eventually. Or maybe people will go to a cinema theater and watch a stream from a different part of the world. Or
Yeah, I've
something
done
like
that. I
yeah.
watched Billy Elliot with my daughter. That was really good, actually. It does, and you can get big theatrical performances, but obviously you have to empty the theatre because you can't really have cranes and cameramen moving all around in front of the audience, or you have to sell the tickets cheap because they can't see it because there's some bloke with a massive, great steady cam running around. Yeah, but that does work. Interesting idea, though. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Charles?
definitely the future.
Yeah, I mean, because you're doing a lot of front of house. I mean, are any of the venues that you go to, is there often a live stream coming out of it, or is that down to the artist wanting to make it happen, or is it venue driven? Or
It's down to the artist. I mean, we've had it with feeds for me, and they'll have like a 4 or 5 camera shoot, but nothing particularly over top. And usually that's for some sort of archiving purposes. Something they'll show later or make some kind of special out of. But I think the live streaming thing is kind of a way of the future. And then I think what will happen, certainly from a live perspective, is that they'll up their game for people who are there. In that, for example, there's a lot of talk about doing shows that are in full surround, kind of like what they were trying to do a long time ago, but like these fully immersive shows where they'll perform an album in quadraphonic or whatever the setup is. I don't want to give away too much of what's possibly going to happen in my near future, but
right.
But yeah, there's a lot of talk about doing stuff like that, because that fully immersive experience is something you just can't replicate at least very easily via streaming. But I think streaming, to answer your question about streaming, I definitely think streaming is the way forward, especially for something like Moogfest, because it's the sort of thing that it's not like a concert in your town that you're like, oh, should I go or watch it streaming? It's not like that, because this is something that's happening in one place in one country away, and not everybody can get to that. So I think it's great that they offer this, and it's good advertising for them too.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. It's interesting. I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to kind of have to interrupt before you go. Are you about to leave the chair? It looks like we're probably getting close to your exit time.
Yeah, maybe I'll just say goodbye now and just take off.
Thank you ever so much for having us, Johan. It's been a pleasure as ever, and a rare one recently because I know you've been busy. So
but I know I'll try to be more available. When I know it's just an hour and I can do 4 to 5, I can take a break and then I can get back to mixing. Then it's fine.
Is that what you're doing now? Have you got?
Yeah, and I have quite a tight deadline, and setting up it becomes quicker and quicker, so I can get it. So it's fine. It's more manageable now. So I'll try to be more available.
Oh well, that's very kind. Thank you very much. Anyway,
thanks for having me.
I wanted to continue the chat with you a bit, Charles, about this because I've got some. It's interesting, isn't it? Do you think that that we're going to end up in a situation where you create the spectacle for the people who show up, so you get the surround and you get the other thing, and then you also have the live stream for people who can't get there, which might not be in surround but might be a kind of ticketed or paid stream thing, so you'd have that. I mean, that would make sense. Do you but the issue is obviously artists may feel that they've been really burned with the live streaming thing, because Spotify, all of these services, which are great for us end users, don't really kind of kick back much to the artists, and it's a very difficult thing to monetize. So do you think that maybe this is something they'll want to hang on to and kind of go, yeah, okay, we'll see partnerships developing, so it's like, yeah, you can come and do this, we'll sell the rights for this, somebody can monetize that, but the artist will actually get something from it rather than have to give it as yet another added extra?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially any acts that are somewhat business savvy understand the importance of creating value through scarcity, and not having their streaming stuff just anywhere on any, whether it's just on YouTube or Spotify or whatever. But if they do a thing where they partner up with someone who has exclusive control over that, then they keep the value of that scarcity. And certainly the acts that I'm talking to, that's their plan. They don't plan on doing some sort of general streaming thing. But to go back to what you're saying earlier about the people who are there in the audience getting a unique experience, that is the idea, is to make it actually a real reward when you come to the show, when you make the effort of coming to the show, which is not to imply that people who don't make the effort are lazy or anything like that. It's just like,
well, it depends what sort of show you're doing. If it's like raw power rock and roll, then that's what you're going to get, and you can't get that anywhere else.
Exactly. It's I do have to say that one part of this that I've been thinking a bit about is that, so I do a lot of shows. I do 80 to 100 shows a year, pretty steadily, and I have yet to be to a show where it seems like at least a third of the audience, and in an audience of say 10,000 people, 3,300 people, are holding up their phones and just like watching the show through their phone, which is just like, I just think that is the strangest thing. The people I know, even I have friends who do that, and they never watch the videos later, unless maybe they're showing a little clip of it to someone else, but they don't go watch it later. But they miss the whole show so they can have it on their phone.
But it's really interesting you say that, because it's a similar sort of thing. You're on holiday, you see something you haven't seen, you take a picture. It's the value through scarcity you're talking. So somebody feels like unless they capture it, they're not getting the full, it will have some value because it's a special event. But you're right, it's not a great way to watch a show, is through your phone, or worrying about whether or not you're holding it upright, or whether the bloke's head in front is in the way or whatever. I agree, and I think it's just this sort of, it's a strange psychological dilemma that you get to when you're going to see something special. Do I live in the moment and enjoy it, or do I try and record it for posterity in my small way? I think that's kind of that's
through my iPhone microphone. It's like I remember like we would do especially in the early days of this, when I was touring with Grace Jones. We'd do a show and then immediately log on to YouTube just to see how many people had uploaded videos of the show. And it's just amazing because it just sounded awful. And, it was always like, the really shaky camera. And,
I suppose
someone trying to clap and film at the same time,
But but again, if you're touring, you're on the road, because some bands will say, yeah, go for it, because it generates forward interest, because people go, I want to see that for myself. That looks like it's probably amazing. It doesn't look amazing here, but that it's conveying something about the show in the future that I would want to go and buy a ticket to go and see that for real. So I suppose that's the choice you make, if you, because some people won't allow it, and that's really difficult, isn't it? That's sort of starting to kind of, you can't bring your phone in. It's like when you go to the American embassy, you've got to leave everything outside. You basically have to go in your clothes. You can't even wear your glasses in some instances. It's kind of crazy. So you can't really do that. So,
well, the only act I worked with that didn't allow people to film was Prince.
Yeah,
Prince had like his two main security guards, and they would have like these super high beam flashlights. And as soon as they saw someone filming, they just shine light right at them until they put the phone down, which was honestly a bit obnoxious. And but a couple of other acts I worked with in the earlier days, they were sort of like, people don't stop filming, please stop filming, but they didn't ban it, and now no one seems to care. But I understand where you're coming from, but to me it's still kind of weird, like, a third of the audience.
Well, maybe the thing to do, maybe the thing that will happen, and I'm just riffing here really, is that you come to the show, you buy the ticket, which is an expensive thing, but as part of that, you get access to something that happened there that was filmed in higher quality. You can get that, or you get the opportunity to buy it at a reduced rate because you were there. You can trade it in. I mean, with the IT these days, it's not something that should be impossible to do, and that might be more fun, to do that. But again, it's like the DVD, isn't it? The DVD would come out of the performances, and that's often a thing that would happen. I mean, it's just a question of how you structure it.
OMD did this thing for a while where, so we had this company with us. Gosh, I forgot their names offhand. They're LA-based company. They were touring around with us. They would take a feed from my console and then a couple of stereo mics, mix them together, and then make a recording of the show. And then they had this mass USB
DVD
duplication.
replicator, yeah.
Or it was USB key thing. So they'd have like 50 USB keys, and it would print it to all those at once. They pull them out, they put another 50 in, print all those, and then they would sell them. And then whoever would sell them for like not much more, like just a little bit. And and it was right at the end of the show they would sell them. And whatever ones they didn't sell, they would just use them for the next show. And on the DVD or on the USBs, it would have like an interview with the band from that same day of the show, just talking about how great it was to play their town and things like that. And people loved that. That was quite a money spinner. I'm kind of surprised we don't really do that, but we did something like that for Roll Over Hall. We did do a live to vinyl thing, and you could get like a download of the show, and then like 2 weeks later we'd send you the vinyl or something like that.
That's an interesting idea. I wonder why. I wonder why that's not because USB replicators of that speed, and they are expensive. But so maybe the costs. But I mean, you could see if it's just taking a feed and then getting a reasonable mix of that, and then sticking it straight in there. Then it's. I mean, you could even do it, but on a stem, so you could have the mic feed and the live feed as Native Instruments stems format. Can you? I mean, there's all sorts of things you could do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great idea. I'm kind of glad in a way we haven't been doing it because it's different now because we're playing much bigger venues than we were 6-7 years ago. 6-7 years ago we were playing like 1,000 seaters, 1,500 seaters, and now we're playing like 2,000 and above seaters. So it's the mix that you hear that's just off the board is actually better because I'm actually doing mixing instead of sound reinforcement because the smaller places you're just doing reinforcement. So I'm actually doing proper mixes which sound better when you're just hearing a board mix. They're not mixed for the PA so much; they're actually mixed just for proper mixing.
Interesting.
But yeah, I wish we'd do it again.
I suppose the thing is it makes that kind of the route to piracy so easy because I've got a file. All I have to do is, upload it somewhere or whatever. But I don't know how relevant that is because with niche, I mean, OMD, they're not like they're not like Beyonce where there is this sort of. It's more of a niche thing, and people are less likely to bootleg it. Maybe it's such a great
people
degree.
Less likely, but and also OMD's not just using because they're the most recent example. They're not particularly precious about recordings of shows. They're just really not. They know it's a board mix. They know it's got its rough spots. Whatever. It's like not like someone's going to go out and just be selling that like crazy, and it's not going to dent their album sales at all. It's going to happen because what they do on the album is very different than what they do live. Because what they do on the album is it's very nice and stuff like that. But when I mix them live, it's a rock show. I mean, it's very loud. It's very powerful. It's very like they say that it's quite aggressive, and that's what they like about it. So it's a completely different thing. It doesn't affect them very much at all if that gets pirated or whatever.
Interesting, but I think like the Moogfest is the first time that they partnered up with Viewhouse and KMWRC, who do some really good in-house stuff. I've posted a couple of videos over the past 6 months of just really great performances. It's usually like Fender Rhodes Electronica. It's really nicely done, and there's a bit interview aspect to it, and I think it's publicly funded, so it's great. It's a great resource. So I mean, yes, to a degree, although from our point of view, the idea of having to say maybe put on an event like that ourselves, because we're streaming now, we've got our facilities here, would be technologically quite challenging and take a different set of personnel. I wouldn't want to run a show like that. I'd rather just that'd be the ultimately rather than just me looking through a camera, I'd have to be looking through all of this stuff, and that would be even less enjoyable from a viewing point of view because it's so stressful. Charles, thank you ever so much for that insight. I think that's probably a good time to say goodbye and stop the show. As you know, we've said goodbye to Yoad, had to get off at 5. Charles very kindly stuck around for a little bit longer. We'll see you again soon. Like I say, I don't think there's a show next week. I'm going to be away on holiday, but the week after we'll be around.
Okay.
Thank you very much for joining us, great. Charles.
Cool, man. Thanks.
Okay, that's it for this week. And don't forget, if you want to enter the competition to win iZotope Neutron 2, we're looking for the hashtag MixBalance and the hashtag Neutron2 to @Sonicstate and @iZotope Inc. That's the hashtag MixBalance and the hashtag Neutron2 to @iZotope Inc. and @Sonicstate. That's it for this week. Thank you very much. Can I do a 2s up? No, we can't because that's that. We'll do a 4s up. Oh, that's even weirder. Wow, that's really weird. I've not seen that before. We'll do a 4s up and we can say goodbye as we go. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you all next time. Take care.